Hey, I'm Diane Prince, and I take questions from the internet on startup founding businesses, entrepreneurship. I answer the questions from either well-known sources or different sources, different pieces of advice on the internet, and then I share my perspective from my own experiences co-founding a company that we built from scratch to $50 million in 6 years and sold to a strategic buyer, and other experiences that I've had in the many startups that I have co-founded throughout the last 25 years. Our question today is, I can't be the only person that dreams of starting their own company but just can't find the right idea. So this person's asking, who else is obsessed with starting up a company, entrepreneurship? How do you find an idea? Do you look for a problem to solve, or did the problem find you? So the first perspective I'm going to share from is from Jared Friedman of Y Combinator. Y Combinator, if you don't know, is an accelerator out of Silicon Valley that has launched businesses like Airbnb, Dropbox, and lots of other Stripe, Instacart, so you name it, out of Silicon Valley. So here's what Jared Friedman has to say. And I'm not reading the whole article, but I'll post it in the notes so that you can go back and read the article. So the first most common mistake is believing that you need an amazing idea to get started. What this usually looks like is someone who believes that the key to having a successful startup is starting with a brilliant idea. And so they're waiting to have a brilliant idea before they start anything. It's really easy. But when you look at successful companies today, okay, this is really interesting, like Google or Facebook, to think, wow, that's such a brilliant idea. But here's what he says, I can tell you it only looks that way in hindsight. When Google started, it was like the 20th search engine. And when Facebook started, it was like the 20th social network. What made them successful wasn't a brilliant initial idea, it was a good enough idea combined with great execution. So that is from an article, and there's a video as well from Y Combinator on how to get startup ideas. I'm going to share one more, also from an investor at Y Combinator, Paul Graham, also a founder and investor. And this is just an excerpt from his article and what Paul Graham has to say. Okay, so why do so many founders build things no one wants? Because they begin by trying to think of startup ideas. That MO is doubly dangerous. It doesn't merely yield few good ideas, it yields bad ideas that sound plausible enough to fool you into working them. He says at Y Combinator, we call these made up or sitcom startup ideas. He says, imagine one of the characters on a TV show was starting a startup. The writers would have to invent something for it to do, but coming up with good startup idea is hard. It's not something you can do for the asking. So unless they got amazingly lucky, the writers can come up with an idea that sounded plausible, but was actually bad. Okay, and then he goes on to, it's a longer article and I'll post it so that you can read it. But very interesting, he talks about competition as well. Because a good idea, I love this point, because a good idea should seem obvious, when you have one, you'll tend to feel that you're late. Don't let that deter you. And I hear this all the time, that people are worried if somebody else has the idea, or that somebody else is going to steal their idea, or he not necessarily steal it, but hear it and do it themselves. Worrying that you're late is one of the signs of a good idea. 10 minutes of searching the web will usually settle the question. Even if you find someone else working on the same thing, you're probably not too late. It's exceptionally rare for startups to be killed by competitors. so rare that you can almost discount the possibility. So unless you discover a competitor with the sort of lock-in that would prevent users from choosing you, don't discard the idea. So you can go to this article and read more on what Paul Graham says, and such good points. So I'm going to share now from my perspective and from building a company bootstrapping, which means building it from revenue. We did bring in some investors in the form of co-founders, but most of my experience is in actually building companies through revenue. So I built a $50 million business, not $1 billion business, and I'm going to talk to you from my perspective. I also back up a little bit. I believe that there is so much information out there for entrepreneurs. I've been doing this since 1996, and I have had the experience and the vantage point of building businesses back before all of this was such a thing. So excuse me. So back when you didn't really say you were an entrepreneur. I mean, literally the only people who said they were an entrepreneur would be like people like Donald Trump, because you just built a business. And so I like to take things that I realize now as I've crossed over into this other decade or decades and built businesses and consulted and coached businesses in this new era. Or maybe not so new, but this whole startup era, sometimes there's so much noise and there's so much advice. But being an entrepreneur means that we get to build a business how we want it. That to me is the most exciting part about entrepreneurship. I mean, otherwise I'd stay in a job. But for me, it's being able to, and I think most people really, it's being able to create something and make something and live the entrepreneur life. So entrepreneurs, startup founders, whatever, how you identify as a business owner, listen to from my perspective, what has worked for me is to listen to what other people have to say, so you can listen to all that advice and all those things that might be swarming around in wherever, on social media, Clubhouse, maybe talking to people, mentors, advisors, and then filtering what makes sense for you and what you want to build. To that point, the thing that I would add to what these guys said from Y Combinator, I would add one of the most important things is to know what you want, and this may be the most important thing, to know what you want to get out of being an entrepreneur. That to me is the most important thing to figure out first, because look, so my first company was, I mean, it sounds super random, but it was a staffing agency specifically for title insurance people, the people who wrote title policies and did all the research and technical stuff behind that part of real estate transactions in the United States. Okay, super specific and random, right? Obviously something that was not a passion of mine when I was growing up. But we did have, there's a whole other topic on product market fit and timing. We had that. But not only that, when we brainstormed or brain dumped or whatever you call it, our ideas, so I too was in this stage. For me, I didn't think of a problem to solve and then create the business. I too, like this person who asked the question, I too realized that I wanted to own a business and then had to come up with an idea. Now, my first co-founder was my then husband. We were newlyweds. We knew what we wanted. We had a goal of building a business, working together, and selling it to a strategic buyer, or that was our idea really in our business plan, in under 10 years. So as we were looking at ideas, some ideas would come across our desk, but when we were constantly talking to other people. We were only 26 when we started thinking about this, and 27 when we started the company. So when ideas came across, some of them were maybe good ideas and would build a credible business, but they weren't ideas that would get us the results that we wanted and what we wanted to see if we could accomplish. So for example, you might, an example that I think is really kind of clear is if you're starting a business, there's a big difference if you're starting a restaurant or a bakery versus maybe a retail bakery versus a commercial wholesale bakery that's going to supply all of the restaurants in Los Angeles with baguettes, or maybe you're building something like Postmates, where you're actually creating a giant tech company that could be a $1 billion company. So all of these things could be good ideas, and they're all going to be a very different way that you're going to live your life. So do you want to have a business where you might be putting away a good amount of income, and you love your business, and maybe it's a community business, and you do it for the unforeseeable future. Maybe you sell it one day down the line. Maybe somebody inherits it. Maybe you sell it to an employee, or maybe you just keep it until and you stash away a whole bunch of money, and it's a really nice career. Or maybe you have an idea and you want to be a unicorn, and so you want to be a $1 billion company, and then you have to have that idea and what you're going to execute that can actually get you to be that $1 billion company. And then that's going to mean a whole other life. That's going to mean raising money, pitching to venture capitalists. It's going to mean a lot of your time is going to be spent creating pitch decks and managing the fundraising. Not only that, managing investors, putting together your cap table, how much percentage people are going to own, agreements. So as you can see, it's a whole completely different thing. So love the advice. And also that I read from those two guys at Y Combinator. And then also with that, it's such a big question, and it's so personal. For me, businesses are successful when the people involved see them as a vehicle to get what they're looking for out of their life, really. And that goes to the founders, the co-founders, the employees. What people are looking for, the business, for it to be sticky for them and to stay committed, they need to see that the business is going to get them to where they want to go. So to me, I think the most important thing in your startup idea, I mean, obviously, well, maybe it's not obvious, but you've got to have product market fit, and there's a whole lot of other things. But as a founder, for you to stay involved and stay motivated and keep wanting to do the really hard things you're going to have to do, because there will be hard things, whether you have that corner bakery or whether you have that $1 billion food disruption giant company. There's going to be really hard things either way. Which hard things do you want to do to get the results that you're looking at? I'm Diane Prince. I have founded, co-founded, started, scaled, sold multiple companies. I coach entrepreneurs now to help them to figure out the best way for you to show up in your own entrepreneurial path. There's lots of advice out there, and I say, listen to the advice, but ultimately we become entrepreneurs because we want to control our own lives, and we want to be creative, and we get to put something new out there in the world. If you'd like to talk to me more, I help people through consulting with tactical and specific advice on how to do things like how to build a team, how to set up a structure as you're hiring people, how to set yourself up for acquisition, and a million other things in between, pitching, talking to VCs, cash flow, anyway, a million things. And I also can help founders through the nitty-gritty feeling part of it, because I've done it. I've been there. I've been a co-founder. I've been a solo founder. And I like to take the advice that's out there and filter it so that it makes sense for me and for my clients. I have the vantage point of looking back at what I've done, and sometimes, a lot of times, because I was really young and knew everything then, and now I can look back and say, oh, that's why that worked, or yeah, oh no, that advice does not make any sense to me because I have put it through the test and it does not work. So anyway, I'm Diane Prince, and feel free, there's a link below to book a call with me, and I hope you enjoyed this video. Let me know what you think and what other questions you might want me to answer.